Thanks everybody for being here on short notice. I know it was really short notice, so thank you. As you guys have already seen, we've let Nate go. I would say this was a really tough decision, one that had a lot of thought behind it, a lot of deliberation. I brought in my management team and really relied on them. Talked to Donnie a lot. Something we didn't do lightly. And as we sort of reflect back on the season, there were some real challenges this past year. But after every game, I really looked at a couple things. And in my mind, I asked myself, did we play hard? Did we play smart? Did we play together? And, there were times that we didn't, and sometimes we did. And so that's sort of that consistency that Pacer ethos is all about. And, this is a very, very tough business, and for a lot of different reasons. And being a head coach is, sometimes I wonder, if it is possible, even one person to do, it's got to be tackled as a staff. And I read an article, I think it was on ESPN, Kevin Arnovitz wrote it about, the characteristics of a head coach, and it's skewing, it's changing all the time. And now it's becoming more about human management and bringing out the best and bringing them together. And so, we let it go. And for us, it was again a challenging decision. But when we hired Nate, we wanted to take a risk. We wanted to try something new. We wanted to open up the possibilities, and we didn't want to sort of go down that same path. And we're thankful for Nate. Nate worked his tail off. There's some things he did well. There's some things I think he wished he would have done differently. But for a lot of reasons, but probably the biggest one is we look at our goals of what we're trying to accomplish, and then we line them up with the timelines. And for right now, we felt like that this was the best decision going forward. So with that, I'll take some questions.
Okay, Scott, Agness.
Hey, Kevin, you just kind of laid out what you were looking for last year. Now having 8 months later, how is that thought process, that criteria changed? How bold can you be? What exactly do you have to look for in the next head coach? And you've probably already conducted so many of those interviews from the last time.
Well, we really did an exhaustive search. I know people have, sort of speculated it was made off the cuff. I would guess on each candidate, we probably had 15 or 18 candidates. We probably had 50 pages of notes. And so we did an exhaustive, it was almost too much, to be honest with you. And so I think as we go into that, we'll tap into that database. There's some good candidates in there, but I also think we've learned a lot. And I think that there's certain characteristics, I don't want to pull them out quite yet, but there's certain things that are non-negotiables for me going forward. And, I hope I've learned from this. I hope our staff has learned from this in terms of selecting the right coach, because as I sit here, this is a shared responsibility. It's not just Nate gets let go, but it's my fault. It's our organization's fault. We've got to do better. And we have a certain set of non-negotiables is the best way I can sort of talk about it. And that is, we kind of have an identity already. A little bit of that hard hat and lunch pail has served us well over the last 12 or 13 years that I've been here. And I think we've got to get back to that. So we'll tap into that database that we already have, but I think that it'd be remiss if we didn't open up the playbook a little bit, keep an open mind. There's a few guys that we're sort of looking at hard, or we'll start. But that process really hasn't started yet. It may be in a little bit in our minds, but as the true process of hiring someone, that really hasn't started yet, Scott.
Charlie Clifford.
Hey, Kevin, will you
Hey, Charlie.
consult with any current players on who the next coach may be, or do you feel like you already know what those answers are if you spoke to them?
Well, we talk to players all the time. I think one of our strengths is we're a player-centric organization. But at the end of the day, I think I was talking to Malcolm at one point in time, and Malcolm said, you guys do your work, make your best choice. I know that, I guess you'd say that there's a level of trust that we've built. And of course, if there's a direct relationship, Charlie, like if there's somehow, this league, everybody's kind of played for everybody and they have relationships, and it's like, it's like Kevin Bacon. There's 6 degrees of Coach Popovich or whatever. And so, of course, we would tap into sort of that information, whether they enjoyed the experience, where they pushed them. But you got to be careful, Charlie, because sometimes players, they have opinions, but sometimes they don't know what's the best for the organization, or sometimes they don't know what is the best that pushes them. Sometimes they want, players want, what's comfortable and easy. And sometimes you got to expand that a little bit. So of course we'll talk to them. I don't know at what level. I guess that would be the quick answer.
Ken Sterling.
Wow, I got a Kevin Bacon reference.
I had that on my bingo card.
Yeah, you did. You got a drink.
Hey, Kevin, kind of expanding upon that question, it would seem, and I'm assuming something here, that part of the reason that Nate's no longer the coach is that he couldn't get the buy-in of the players at the level he needed to be able to get them to play at the level he needed to get them to play at. Isn't it easier to get the buy-in on the front end than hope for the best once the guy's hired?
I think that, I think that there's something to that, Kent. I think that, wherever some teams, there's different timelines for every team. As you have a young team and you're pushing them and you're teaching them how to be a professional, that's one type of coach. And that's a certain set of skill sets. And then I think that there's, where we are, we've got a decent team and we're trying to maybe not go from good to great yet, but we're trying to go to good, and those players will have some feedback. So we'll listen. Of course we listen. We've got guys on our team that have earned the right to have a voice. But what I do believe there's a point where someone has to make a decision that pushes those players to push the envelope so they become the best and they don't fall into, I'm just going to play into what I do best. You got to push players. This is a human management. And when I mean push, I don't mean like, hitting them. What you got to do is you got to get them to be their best. And that's what great coaches do.
Bob Kravitz.
Hey, Bob.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I think I know how to use this by now.
Right.
So a year ago, your players chafed under Nate McMillan, and Nate got let go. This year, your players seem to have some difficulties with Nate Bjorkgren, and he got let go. Are you at all concerned about the construction of your locker room?
I could say this individually. I really, really like the locker room. When we went through exit meetings, Bob, I was probably as hard as I've ever been on a group and a team in terms of someone has to step up and be the vocal leader. Someone has got to step in and say, no matter what, I'm going to take this team. This team is mine. And in my mind, I think we have a couple players that can do that, but I hear you. Right now, I'm not sure who that is. I'm hoping. I think there's some great qualities there, but yeah, we may not, and that may be something we have to look for. I remember, Bob, a couple of years ago, our MVP in my mind was a player that didn't play much, and that was Al Jefferson.
Mhm.
And we didn't have, I don't know if we had the Al Jefferson. And so I've tasked our scouting staff, our NBA scouting staff. We need somebody that sits on the bench that's good enough to play, but also holds everybody accountable. I'm telling you, I watched a series, Florida team down south. They've got a player that has played with them for 20 years, and he is the best in the business, and it's why they're good. It's one of the reasons why they're good. And when you have a locker room that holds each other accountable, that isn't afraid to have some tough love, that isn't is willing to give it, then you know you have it. Sometimes with this past team, we might have been just too nice. I think sometimes we just had kind of a nice locker room and came in, did their business, and we need somebody that's going to step up. I've challenged a couple players. I'm excited to see what happens, but we may not have it.
Kevin Brockway.
Yeah, Kevin, you took a chance on kind of a younger assistant coach with no head coaching experience. I know it didn't work out. Does that make you gravitate towards looking with someone with a little more experience, maybe a more mature voice in the locker room, or how do you view that in terms of your candidates going forward?
Well, it's funny you say that, because Kelly Kroskoff, you know, she's built championship teams and she's hired great coaches, and she keeps saying, to her credit, it's an impressive thing to see. She's as impressive as it gets. She says it's really easy to take the pendulum and move it way over. You know, you go from a sort of a modern coach back to traditional, back to and there's a challenge in that. And so I think there's a modicum of the way we look at it. Maybe we don't swing the pendulum so far over, maybe it swings to the middle, but that's hard to do too. You know, I think there's a balance of some experience, but also some new level of basketball, because as I'm watching the playoffs, yeah, you got to defend and you got to get stops, but this new age of basketball is high level offensive talents, and you got to make shots. And so to me, you got to have that balance. You got to be able to sort of do the things you do defensively. And quite frankly, we've had a great assistant coach that really spearheaded that for the last about like 25 years. And we missed that. We missed that. But also you can't get away from the fact that this new NBA is a lot about putting the ball in the basket, and it's an offensive game. So it's threading the needle isn't the easiest thing in the world to do, but we're gonna do it. We're gonna find a good one.
Kevin Bowen.
Hey, Kevin, you kind of hinted at it, I guess, a little bit in that last answer. But when we talked to you a few weeks ago, defense seemed to be, really at the forefront of your mind. How much of a defensive background will be kind of a prerequisite as you look for this new head coach?
Well, I think that's a really good question. And I'm thinking in my mind the best way to answer it. I think when you look at NBA staffs, the head coach has usually one thing he does really well, and then you build out the rest of the staff that helps him. So it feels like the head coach is super important. I'm not saying that guy makes the decision. He's calling the plays. He's calling the defensive sets, but having a group of assistant coaches that have experience and success, is critically important to having a great organization. So from 1 to 4 on the bench is super important, but I just know, look, it's been pounded into me since I've been here from Larry Bird and Donnie Walsh. Defense wins championships. And I believe that. I do believe that. But again, I'm watching the NBA right now, and I'm seeing these guys make shot after shot after shot. And I know it's a balance. You got to be pretty good at both. If you look at the teams that are still playing, most of them are top 10 in offensive efficiency. or defense and defensive efficiency. If you get in the top 5, you're a championship level team. To get both is awfully tough, but it feels better, Kevin, when I watch us play and we're out there grinding on defense. We've been able to win ugly over the last 10 years. And this year, I didn't feel like we could win ugly. I felt like we had to outscore teams. So my initial reaction is always, let's get back to that lunch pail and, hard hat type of a team.
Scott Agness?
First, a follow up to that question. So do you believe in kind of the coordinator system where you hire a head coach, he's the manager, he's the leader, and then you can offset some of the duties with an assistant? Was that what you were hinting at?
I mean, there's not a one way to win an NBA, but I tend to skew that way. Yes, there's still teams in the playoffs that don't exactly do it like that. But my identity, what I feel like works, yes, I think that there's something to that.
And then could you kind of describe ownership's involvement in this decision, this change, and kind of together your outlook for, say, the next 3 years of where this franchise you want to take it?
Of course, I consult Herbie and Stevie. That's just something we do that on a daily basis. But this was my decision, and as we move forward for the next 3 years, we have a good roster. I think we've got a team that can compete at maybe not at the top 3 right now. I think 3 or 4, but we're in that next group. And if healthy, I think we can compete with any of those teams. And once you get into that area, assume health, assume, the team comes together, I think we're a tough out. So I don't know if we'll roll it back and take 3 years and draft. And I think we're in a mode of let's try to be as competitive as we can right now. And it just takes, we're studying teams right now. It takes one good draft or one good trade or one good hire, and teams can really boost up. And so that will be our goal.
Tony East?
Kevin, you have to let a coach go after 1 year. How much does that make you reflect on your hiring process, and how much does that impact the way you will go about hiring your coach this offseason this time around?
Well, I would say this. I beat myself up pretty hard over this one. The thing that I've learned is that head coaching seat is a very challenging seat, and sometimes you sit in it and it's a lot different than you think. And so experience is something that some experience in championship level basketball is important, whether it's a head coach or assistant or something else. But, we've been evaluating today. We're going to evaluate tomorrow. If it's one thing that I think I ask of our staff, my immediate staff, is to let me know what I can be doing better. And we're doing a pretty hard autopsy on the process, and we're gonna be better at it. It's not easy. Obviously, self-reflection is never easy, but I have a great group that I really rely on. Chad and Kelly and Ted. They are a very talented group of people, and I have a lot of confidence that they can help us through this.
Bob Kravitz?
Yeah, Kevin, to the degree you're willing to share publicly, where was the disconnect in terms of human management with Nate and his team?
I don't know if that serves anything. I think Nate beat himself up today as much as any coach I've ever seen. He took it pretty hard. And so I have too much respect to sort of open up those wounds. I think he knows what he needs to improve on, and I think he will. And we've had multiple conversations today, and I'm sure we're going to have multiple ones in the future. I consider him a friend, and I want to help him. I want to help him. He's now been a Pacer. I want to help him as much as I can. But I just don't want to go there, Bob. Hopefully you understand.
Yep.
Charlie Clifford?
Kevin, looking ahead and maybe the timing isn't right here either, but Terry's no longer under contract in Portland. You mentioned a few names you're going to zero in on. Is he on the short list of someone you need to make sure you need to talk to him before you go forward?
I just let a coach go today, Charlie.
Yeah, no, I got you.
I want to fully respect that before I even dig into the potential candidates.
You got it. Thanks.
Thanks for asking, though.
Scott Agness,
Kevin, can you describe your process with your front office? You just named all of them. Does one of them take the lead in the search process? Do you assign each of them different coaches to investigate? How do you handle that?
Right now, again, we're just a day into this, really not even a day. What we've done is we've divided some background work. We'll identify a few coaches. They'll go do 5 to 10 calls and background on that coach. We'll circle back. We'll try to get to a strength and weaknesses. And then after that, we'll say, well, how do we build not a roster? How do we build a staff, an assistant coaching staff around his weaknesses? And then we'll start doing due diligence on those assistant coaches. And so this isn't something that takes a few phone calls and you're done. It's a divide and conquer. And it literally is what happens is we divide, we make a ton of calls. We come back in for a couple hours. We get all our information on the board. We get it down to a little smaller, maybe more bulleted point, and then we're off again, the next group of candidates to get that strength and weaknesses. And then at the end of the day, I probably was pulled into this past year of like, I wanted to take a risk. I wanted to take a chance and have something that maybe had a lower floor, but a higher ceiling. And this year, maybe it's maybe skewed down a little bit and maybe look at something a little bit different. And again, I have in my mind, I don't want to come forward with that quite yet.